Hello everyone, welcome to Trend Talks. This is a new initiative by Solarplaza in which we want to share with you the lessons learned and the visions of some key market and industry experts in order to accelerate the renewable energy transition. And today we're launching the very first session. I'm very proud and honored to have Jigar Shah here talking with me today. Hello Jigar, how are you doing?
Hi Edwin, good. How are you?
Yes, I'm fine, and I'm very honored to have you here in this first session. Tell me a little bit, is this crisis, how is this personally impacting you?
Well, I have a 4.5-year-old at home, so my first calling is not homeschooling, but I've become, a bit of an expert on figuring out how to keep my child occupied.
Yeah. Is it also business-wise impacting you?
Well, I mean, we're certainly in a better situation to generate capital because we, raised a lot of money last year, and we are now in a situation where we have money to invest. So from that perspective, I have to count my blessings. But clearly, business is disrupted, right? We don't have anyone going into the office. Everyone's working from home. People with children are, far less productive than they were before. Meeting new investments are very difficult because we're not going to send people money without meeting them in person first. And visiting the site and double checking to make sure the assets are actually there. And, all of that is impacted right now. But we've only been sheltering at home for about 5 or 6 weeks. And so, my sense is that, business for us will get back probably the next few months.
If you look further ahead, so what do you expect is going to happen after this? Will the
Well,
industry pick up immediately again?
yeah, I mean, we have to differentiate, obviously, the world from our industry. I think when you look at the world, pick a number, but let's call it 20% of the world is discretionary spending or more, right? Vacations, renting out a room for your birthday party, or all of those things, it's likely to take 2 years for much of that to come back. Airplane traffic after 9/11 took 2 years to get back to its previous passenger traffic. And I'm sure the same thing will happen here. So in general, we're probably in a global depression, right?
Yeah.
Depression is defined by probably over a 10% reduction in the global economy, right? That's not what happened in the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. So I think the world will be hurting, but I think for those of us who work in the infrastructure business, right, not just solar and wind, but also wastewater treatment plants or electric buses or energy efficient ships or whatnot, my sense is this is the time when governments will be spending more money to replace the tax revenue and other things that they've lost from the discretionary part of the economy into our business. So I think we're going to be better coming out of the recession than many other industries.
Okay, and so for now, until that bounce back will take place, what do you think is the major challenge for the financial sector? Because you're mostly involved in finance, right?
Well, the financial sector, as we all know, is always protected, and everyone seems to help them a lot, whether it's the Federal Reserve or the IMF or others, right? I think the bigger thing is that specific policies are affected, right? So for instance, in the United States, they use tax equity to fund a lot of these projects. Obviously, people are not paying as much taxes this year, and so tax equity is harder to come by. But separately, I would say that the financing sector is recognizing that we are defined as a flight to quality, right? So my friend Russell Gold, wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal that interviewed a lot of banks, and the banks are now saying that they prefer owning solar and wind to anything else in the energy space. And so
Wow.
if more solar and wind projects are coming, they're prioritizing them right now, even in the middle of the crisis, and funding them. So, that's quite a strong position that we found ourselves in after, 10 years after the Great Recession.
Yeah, and going further on that, so any crisis has some new opportunities. What opportunities do you see arise from this crisis?
Well, I do think that oil prices being low is something that I honestly think that people haven't really thought through how fragile the oil industry really is. That actually, remember the Russians and the Saudis were complaining about 1.3 barrels a day of oil cuts in January. And today they're, agreed to 10 million barrels a day of oil cuts. It's actually quite possible to disrupt the entire oil industry with 2 million barrels a day of oil cuts. And when you look at the proclamations by the UK, by the state of California, by Norway, by others, I think there are a lot of people who are looking quite seriously at accelerating the banning of internal combustion engines early. Right? Because they're saying people like clean air. The fact that we've had the cleanest air that we've had in, 35 years, is pretty impressive, right? And the people in India for the first time in Punjab can, in 35 years can see the Himalayas again, right? And so a lot of people are saying, well, how do we keep that going? Well, India has a huge electric vehicle program. And in fact, if they just mandated that all new vehicle sales are electric, it wouldn't disrupt the market that much, right? I mean, the amount of new car sales right now is actually quite low. And in fact, there are a lot of used cars. So people who are addicted to internal combustion engines can buy used cars. It would help used cars tremendously to keep their value, which is good for everybody. And all new cars should be electric. And today in the United States, at least, 14 automakers have an electric vehicle model. And so you could see governors and mayors at the local level saying, just from a human health perspective, we're going to ban all new sales of internal combustion engines. And I think you would see 3-4 million barrels a day of permanent demand destruction of oil.
So is that also the topic and trend you're most excited about, the introduction of the electric vehicles?
Well, I think it's about dreaming bigger, right? I mean, I think that for a long time, we in the business space of sustainability have been really focused on incremental improvement. Every year we do a little bit better, we do a little bit better. And, and now we're big, right? We're, solar and wind is 100 gigawatts a year market plus, or actually solar by itself is 100 gigawatts plus.
Yeah.
And, I think that we should have the same sort of aspirations for these other areas. So waste, for instance, right? I mean, recycling is been completely disrupted by the fact that China is no longer taking the world's recyclables. So everyone from Europe to the United States are saying, what do we do with all of these recyclables? Right now, they're just getting buried in a landfill, just like regular garbage. We have the technologies. Europe is leading, but the US can also, use some of those technologies to sort all of that trash and put some of that trash back into the circular economy. There have been many circular economy investments over the past 10 years. So we know how they've worked and some of which have not worked. And you could see a rapid ramp up of investment into circular economy waste type investments. Same thing's true with battery storage or even demand response and load control. I think you and I were at a conference maybe in 2010 together. Yeah. Where in the UK, where we talked about the fact that we can move around load with the same level of dexterity that we move around supply. And it's time for us to do that. And I think that the technology has just gotten better and we need to make it better and better.
Yeah, so this crisis might accelerate some of these newer developments, actually. What would be some important lessons for new and young entrepreneurs that you would give them?
Well, I think it's very clear that this virus will be worse than we thought. Right. So that in general, not in terms of death, but in terms of the economic toll. So I think that the world will not fully reopen for 2 years. And so you'll have small openings next month and small openings the month after. But in terms of a vibrant economy that people were used to pre the virus, this is going to take 2 years. And so people need to be very careful about launch dates, about figuring out how they support their products, how long development cycles will be, and see, is this going to be the top priority for the local government, or is the local government going to prioritize some other initiative over their initiative, right? And so I think that this is not the time for wishful thinking. I think it's a time for planning and preparation. And I do think that we are going to be prime beneficiaries out of the stimulus packages that are coming from many of these countries. But even those stimulus packages will take much longer for governments to implement because of all the social distancing requirements, et cetera. So I just think that people need to be very patient and not make plans based on a fast recovery.
Okay, that's a very wise lesson. Be patient. I experienced that myself as well. What question would you like to have answered by our next guest?
Well, one of the questions on my mind is really about how diversity and ESG and some of these other initiatives that our industry has been pursuing is going to fare under this virus, right? Are we going to go back to basics and do the same things we were doing before, or are we actually going to prioritize our communities, the sustainability of our supply chain, and actually making sure that we're bringing in everyone of every background into our industry? I think that initiative is still very important and one that people should continue to focus on.
Nice question. Okay, well, I'd like to thank you so much, Jigar, for being our first honored guest on this new initiative. And I wish you a nice day and a lot of prosperity and good health for the coming future.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate our time together and the great work that Solarplaza is doing.
Thanks, Jigar.